This is the original Firefighter Podcast, where we talk about anything you would talk about at the firehouse kitchen table. And sometimes we even talk about fighting fires. Make sure to subscribe and hit that bell. Let's get into the show. Welcome back to the show. I am Will Peterson, your host, and with me is co-host Phil Nedved, and in the studio also is our engineer, Aaron Bybee. And we're going to have all three of us on the show today. And you might notice that the format is very different from past episodes. We've been hinting all along that we were making changes at the original Firefighter Podcast. You will from time to time see the original studio as we come back into different sessions that we do in the future. But as we move forward, we've been teasing the fact that I am relocated to Whitefish, Montana. I'm actually looking at Big Mountain or Whitefish ski resort right now. I can look out and actually see the ski hill right now from my where I'm doing the podcast from, and it's definitely a change of scenery for sure. And where I came from, Rockford, Illinois, I was there for 28 years. I retired as a district chief or a battalion chief, as we called it in Rockford. And starting July 7th, tomorrow, Monday, July 7th, I will begin a new position with the Whitefish Fire Department as their assistant fire chief. And so that is my journey. The original firefighter journey is going to continue as we have rounded out our team with myself and Phil Nedved as the co-hosts going forward. You will be seeing both of us on the show, and from time to time, Aaron, you're going to be in as much as you would like to be. He's our glorious engineer, and also we'll be having other guests on the show as well. So this is just the first steps in our effort to go broader, further across the country, and that will absolutely be on display here. But what we're going to be focused on, from time to time, if you're watching, I'm going to be looking up at my other screen here because I just want to make sure that we're tracking the intentional topics that we want to cover today. We are only going to talk about two specific topics. In this past week, the fire service has been challenged. I always keep thinking back to 9/11. I've said this so many times in the show. The firefighters in the American Fire Service have proven themselves time and time and time again. And this past week in Coeur, Idaho, with the firefighters that were shot and killed in the line of duty, I can't even really describe what that must do to the hearts and minds of firefighters across the country. We'll try to make sense of it. There's really no sense of it, but we'll try to make some, at least draw attention and understanding to the situation. Before I get into, getting the other, both of you, Phil and Aaron, into this conversation, I just want to make a quick comment. I've already been out and about exploring my new territory, my backyard, if you will, here in Whitefish. I was at a bar on Flathead Lake yesterday called at the Raven, and I introduced myself to the bartender, and I had said, hey, I'm now living here, and I made mention that I'll be joining the Whitefish Fire Department tomorrow. And he said, oh, welcome to the area, and you'll love it out here. And then in the same breath, he said, hey, did you remember to bring your bulletproof vest? Oh, yeah. That's how fast. I mean, I just said, I was from Rockford, Illinois. I had moved here to Whitefish within the last few days. And I introduced, obviously, he put two and two together that I was a firefighter and in the fire service. And that was the next thing that he said out of his mouth was, had I brought my bulletproof vest. So I just thought that was an interesting comment from a lay person, and what people across the country, I wonder what they're thinking right now about what the firefighters actually do in their community beyond the structure fires and the medical calls and things like that. What are your thoughts there, Phil?
Yeah, it's a shame that it's actually come to that. I mean, we risk a lot on other things, and like you and I had worked together to develop the team that we had, where we now have helmets and bulletproof vests as firefighters, and that's a real thing. And it's a shame that something like this had to happen again. And it was not even a violent type of incident that they were called for. This was something that it was your normal routine, especially routine for them, probably brush fire that they were going to, only to be awaited by someone who was a cold-blooded killer who didn't care about human life and especially his own at the end of the day, because he took his own life. So, we don't know the motive yet, if there even was one. I'm sure that'll be coming, but as of right now, I mean, they have no no motive to go off of because there was no manifesto and there was no anything else. But already online, you have the conspiracy theorists talking about different, motives that are just totally unfounded. And that's the worst thing that people can do in a time like this, is because it's taking away from what actually happened. And that's a loss of life for 2 firefighters, 2 battalion chiefs who won't be going home anymore, and a third who's still fighting. And our prayers go out to the family of those firefighters that were lost, and prayers to that firefighter to keep fighting, and make sure he pulls through.
Yeah. Yeah. So, as we said at the beginning here, we said we're going to cover 2 topics. We are going to go in a little bit to the further into the shooting at Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, and then we're also going to be talking about the devastating flooding in Texas and the loss of life down there, and again the first responders and firefighters on the front line there as well. But before we go to Texas, we're going to stay with Idaho. So we're specifically talking about the incident that happened last week. The date of that was on was June 30th, and then because I took off to drive across country the 1,500 miles to get me out to Whitefish, I left on July 1st. So that incident happened on June 30th. And I was actually sitting, I had really nowhere to stay back in Rockford for my final night. So I was actually at a fellow firefighter's house, Kyle Hill, who's been on our show. So he gave me a bunk for the night. And we actually just, we're just kind of hanging out, just, talking for my final night in Rockford. And we turned on the news, and here was the story coming out of Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, about the deadly shootings. That it was started out as a intentionally set wildland fire, and there was response it would look to be that a couple of different departments responded to this area. Specifically, and I will apologize if I do not say the first fire department correctly. The Coeur County Fire and Rescue, the fire chief, the battalion chief there that was killed was so we're talking about the names of the 2 firefighters victims from the ambush in Idaho were Frank Harwood and John Morrison. Frank Harwood, 42 years old, was a battalion chief with the Coeur County Fire and Rescue, and John Morrison, 52, was a battalion chief with the Coeur d'Alene Fire Department. And then a third firefighter, I believe from the Coeur d'Alene Fire Department, was also shot, but is surviving at this point. His name is Dave Tisdale, and he was severely injured during the attacks. So we've lost 2 battalion chiefs, and I believe a driver engineer was his rank with the Coeur d'Alene Fire Department. So we've had 3 firefighters shot, 2 of them killed in the line of duty. And I just can't imagine what that's done to, their departments prospectively. What's your guys' thoughts there?
Aaron, you want to go?
Yeah, I mean, it just sounds like a nightmare, I mean, I wonder, how this is going to shape actually the mindset of fire departments across the country going forward over the next, month, 6 months, few years. Is this kind of a Columbine moment for the fire department where, now we're going to be looking at active shooter situations or maybe approaching things a little bit differently? As we move forward, it seems to me, Will, in my conversations with you guys, that typically you're not the first in an active shooter situation. You might be first on scene, but you're kind of waiting for law enforcement to step up with them rolling in and kind of being the first on scene and taking fire like that. I'm wondering what you guys think is going to be the response across the country in preparedness for the fire service.
Well, one thing I will say is not every department is the same, right? We all have different practices and policies in place, and there's a lot of smaller fire departments that run with police on every call, whether it's a medical emergency or a fire emergency or anything like that. Bigger cities, unfortunately, don't have the luxury of that. Police are busy doing their duties, not responding to our duties. So it's something that maybe there's a change with that. Maybe there is a police response to medical incidents in the future with more fire departments rather than just smaller fire departments. But even something like this, I don't think there was much that could have been prepared for. This is just a tragic incident that, unfortunately, we've talked about mental health of of people in the past, and I think that's what this was. Like I said, they're still developing on what occurred and how this could have happened, and what was the issue with this person. But I mean, even they've interviewed his grandfather and said that he had an interest in becoming a firefighter. It's like, that's not the way to go about it, I guess. So we don't know what interactions he may have had in the past. I'm sure that'll come out soon. I know there's been discussion of, his home life as a child with his father, and, police records and things like that of domestic issues. So it definitely will be interesting to see going forward what the reasoning was, if they can ever find it. But yet again, there's no one to answer for that anymore because he took his own life. I think moving forward in the fire service, it's all we can do is be aware, right, and not get complacent on incidents that we're going to. And we've talked about it in the past of, we wanted bulletproof vests, we needed helmets, we needed that kind of gear for those violent type of incidents. But then you get to a point of, are you going to be wearing it on every call? Like, just because it's a medical emergency that you might have something. I literally got off shift this morning and went on 3 incidents that were police request medical incidents. Am I wearing a vest on every type of that call? Because the police are there, they have their vests on. And unfortunately, there's many times where we go on these incidents where police say the scene is secure, the scene is safe. And that's what we're trained for, to hear those words before we approach. And unfortunately, our safe and the police safe is different because they do have a firearm and they do have that bulletproof vest on, to where they might be a little bit more comfortable responding to certain incidents than we would, because we don't have the same equipment or tools. No different than them going to a fire, not having our SCBAs, not having our fire gear, and trying to go into an incident like that. So I think moving forward is definitely going to be interesting. The biggest thing I think and I hope is people are more aware of their surroundings, and that's one thing that I love to preach, is situational awareness is huge. You always have to have that safety officer, even if it's on that medical incident, to make sure that someone's watching the back of the members out there that are doing the treatments and treating patients or at that fire incident.
What's your thought on like armored response vehicles? Do you think that there's going to be a trend towards some sort of reinforcement of the apparatus in a more ballistic sense?
Unfortunately, I don't think so, because it all comes down to money, and they're not willing to buy the equipment that we need now to be safe.
We're seeing that stuff roll out though in some bigger cities
for sure. I mean, my
FDIC, I think it was International Armored Group that had their vehicles on display there, and they could be rigged out for fire, for whatever purpose, as EMS, whatever purpose is necessary, where you're going to need to go in and respond to a situation where you may come under fire or be at threat. So
fire service has already made some serious adjustments to their approach to these types of scenes. We may not see it as greatly as we would see it in the traditional sense when we stock our fire trucks with new hose or new nozzles, and everything is very fire focused, very fire driven. Or just the changes in extrication equipment, where I've made a joke that the first Jaws of Life I ever picked up in the fire service weighed 38,000 pounds.
Right.
And now it's pretty light and very easy for an individual to manipulate. They're all battery driven.
And now they're battery driven, not hydraulic.
Yeah, and they're battery driven, and then they're easy to operate. They're very, very, very good. They've come a long way. But to this point, there have been these incremental changes to the fire service approach to violent scenes, to include active shooter events. The thing that I keep thinking about is that there have been 30 firefighters that have been killed in the line of duty since 1990, and 30 firefighters is in the context of what our conversation is here. 30 firefighters is again directly involved in a at the scene type of shooting, where a firefighter has been killed in the line of duty. That's very, very focused in the incident of itself. It's not the norm. Whereas with police officers, it's quite normal for them to obviously come in contact and to be basically engaged with other people who have weapons on them or are actively trying to flee or shoot the cop intently to try to get away, put the cop down, and then flee the scene. When we talk about being very specific about the active shooter or the active threat, and we saw this in Rockford, Illinois. We've had active shooters and we've had active threats. We've had an active stabbing person that was running around a neighborhood for 31 minutes and put down 12 people and killed 4 of those people with different knives. I mean, that was the way he went about his carnage. With the active shooter that's out there and planning the next thing, we often don't think that the firefighters are the ones that are going to have to, take the bullet. And the police officers, I mean, at this point, where we're at in society and the number of active shooter events that we've gone to, police officers are at a point now where they understand that they are the sacrificial lamb. There's not probably going to be, unless you really, really fuck up your situation, there should not be another Uvalde, Texas situation. The reports come out, they staged for too long. They didn't engage. They allowed this shooter to, shoot up entire classrooms without any engagement by law enforcement. And that's just not going to stand anymore. I mean, the fact that you took an oath that swore to protect people with your badge and your gun and your engagement and the training that it takes to go in and understand that situation, that's just an expectation by society now to say that the police officers are not going to wait. They are going to engage and put the threat down. What, to Phil's point, is when we roll up to a fire scene, or a medical call, we believe it to be exactly what we're seeing. We believe our eyes and we believe our ears, what we're hearing and what we're seeing. So when we roll up on our fire trucks and we see smoke in the distance and we, signal to dispatch and incoming units that, yes, we have a fire. This is what we're going to be doing. This is our tactic. This is our strategy. This is our approach. This is going to be where we want other units to go. We're going to start operating within seconds of our arrival. If we don't think or know that there's a threat there, we're just going to do our job. We're going to do the
Right,
task
yeah.
that we are meant to do on that scene. When you introduce an active threat that suddenly just ambushes you, there's no good way to facilitate the protection of firefighters in that moment, because they're already so committed, and they have to be, because every second counts and you're trying to make a difference in the immediacy. And take the threat of the possibility of somebody shooting at you. There's already plenty of dangers on the fire scene that, things that firefighters have to be, careful of, concerned of, that are just naturally occurring. It's the active shooter or the active threat that is the anomaly. And that's the best we have right now, is to bring the awareness to the whole American Fire Service has to be very, very vigilant and understanding that this is now, I'm not going to, maybe I'll stop short and say that this is our new reality, but it has to play a part in what's the possibility. It should be a prevalent possibility that you are going to a location, an address, or an incident that's been set up to put us in the worst possible place, to catch us off guard. And that's the part about all departments have to start adding this into their training requirements, so that all firefighters have a baseline understanding of the possibility. What can you do in the moment that things start to happen? How can you react? Can you, time, distance, and shielding is kind of a hazmat thing. But if I can put myself further away from the situation, if I can shield myself from the situation as it's unfolding, if I can use the fire truck as defense, Phil's right. We cannot wear a full turnout gear, an SCBA, and then somehow underneath all that, I've also got a ballistic vest on, because it's not realistic. Now, let's be clear though, that we do know in the fire service that 80% of your call volume is medical. And when I reference those 30 firefighters that have been killed in the line of duty since 1990, to include these 2 firefighters out in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, a large majority of the percentage goes and swings towards the medical side, the medical calls. If we can reduce our exposure or at least give ourselves some protection, just like you said, Phil, I'm on the medical scene, you're on the medical scene, the same scene that the police officers are on, and they're wearing ballistic vests. And some people might, tune into the show and go, there's no way that I'm wearing a ballistic vest on little old granny that fell down. I'm just there to help her up. I get that. I get that. But there's also plenty of senile people out there that they don't know why you're even there. Or you might have to be, quote unquote, forcing an entry into a house. And, grandpa doesn't know why you're even coming into the house and he's got a shotgun.
I mean, that's actually happened,
Yeah.
right? I mean,
Yeah.
there was a patient who had a seizure and they were postictal. And when they came out of it, there were men standing in the room and they grabbed the gun and shot. Well, they were the fire department there to provide treatments. Right. I mean, this happens. And yet again, it's that self-awareness. I've had this before where I had a patient whose blood sugar was low, who was not acting appropriate. I walked in that room and I saw a gun on the bed next to him. And me and my partner, all I did was push him out and say gun. So everyone heard it. And fortunately, it was a BB gun. But you couldn't see the orange tip on the thing, or it had even been removed from it. But at the time, it looked like a real gun at the instant that I saw it. And this guy was reaching for it. And, these incidents happen. And I know I've told a story on here before when I was on here with my old partner, Chase, and we discussed a time where we had a guy, he was passed out drunk on the ground at 2:00 in the morning. We decided to stop and give assistance, and he wanted to fight us and started reaching for his waistband and started saying gun, and the dispatchers heard that on the other end. Fortunately, he had no gun, but it's one of those things where in my career, I've had multiple instances where this has occurred or possibly could have been something worse had I not, been aware and kept that situational awareness. And that's one of the things like I said, I try and preach all the time. We're seeing these incidents, unfortunately, occur to first responders. 3 days prior, on June 26th in Milwaukee, a Milwaukee police officer was ambushed and killed, and his partner was injured. And he passed away on the 29th from the injuries that he sustained. So, I mean, that's close to home for...
These ambushes are happening because you go back just a couple of weeks prior to that, you had a Chicago police officer who was also ambushed. So this whole ambush situation is what we need to pay. Now we need to turn our heads to that situation and not, this is not to look the other way about all the other possibilities. So like I said, we just described that you can have a situation that's very benign. You can have a situation where by saying the word benign, I mean, you roll up on a medical call, you're there for a low blood sugar, the incident that Phil was just talking about. Low blood sugar, fire department goes inside, they find a way in, they start to treat that patient. The patient comes to because the blood sugars come up and now the brain is functioning correctly again. And we don't know, maybe we just didn't do our due diligence to be sure that there wasn't a handgun underneath his pillow or tucked away in his waistband somehow. I don't know. I mean, this is what the fire service has to start thinking about is, do you have a base level of safety that we start to instill into every possibility and say, we no longer care that you're going to a low blood sugar call. We care about the patient, yes, to treat them for what we're being called for, but let's add a component into our approach to all of our situations to say, is there a possibility of there being a gun or a weapon within hand reach of the patient? And if we haven't checked that box, then can we truly call that the scene is safe?
Right.
And if we can't say that, then because of our history now that we're seeing playing out, and it's playing out very, very rapidly right now with these ambushes, if you will, if you add that into the equation, now we have to start thinking about, is this a immediate, meant to be hazardous, intentional situation for firefighters? Is it a happen circumstance? We just happen to be there on scene. And like we said, something unfolds, something very unexpected, but we have to start being able to say that we're expecting this now. This is a possibility.
Well,
is there anything in the current SOGs for like a scene size up or whatever, where this is included in that? Or is it?
Yeah. And again, I think Phil, go ahead and answer because obviously you're still with the Rockford Fire Department. I'm a very, aware of what the SOGs and SOPs are with Rockford Fire. I can't say that every single department across the country has the same approach, or I can't even say that every department is actually operating their operations off of any kind of, written policy. Hopefully they are. I mean, that's the whole point of this particular episode, is to encourage firefighters that are out there listening and hearing this podcast, and really honestly, any podcast or any of the information that comes out of Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. All of us should be saying, asking the question, how are we doing this at home? How are we doing this? And ask ourselves, and with intent, are we happy with what we're doing? Are we okay with what we're doing? Or are there places that we need to, are there areas of our department that we need to change our approach?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing with this, we can go back to this incident, and like we've said, it's something that you can't prepare for that. They were driving their trucks to a fire and gunshots started to happen. We didn't respond to the violent incident where we were waiting for police to secure it before we even went in, or we were on scene of an incident and it became violent. And those are types of incidents where we back out. And if we can bring the patient with us, great, we're bringing the patient with us. If we can't, we're leaving, because if we're not safe and we become the next victim, now what happens to that victim that we're there for, right? Unfortunately, they become less of the priority. Because that's what we're trained to do, is to go in there and help people. But what happens when we're the person that needs help, right? So, it's just one of those things for this specific incident. I don't know. I mean, there's not much to be able to prepare for other than your situational awareness and gut feelings, I guess. But
Well,
at the end of the day,
I think that one of the things that we can be doing is acknowledging that there is training that's out there.
absolutely.
Our department has gone through rescue task force training, and RTF, in and of itself, the intention is obviously to stop the bleeding and keep the heart going, to give people who are shot or stabbed or any other badly received injury from a nefarious individual. That rescue task force type training, it does account for the fact that you are not only treating patients, but the possibility that you might be treating a downed police officer and a injured down firefighter. So, the first responders become victims too. And this is the situation in Coeur d'Alene, is that the firefighters and the firefighters became victims. Now, there may not be much that we can do with those individuals because they've already been hit, and they were hit by surprise. So the element of the surprise is the beast out there, is that we don't know where it's going to happen, or what is around the corner, if you will.
Right.
But the second that it happens, and I'll tell you what, I've listened, I'm sure you guys have too, and I would tell everyone that's listening and viewing this episode, do yourself a favor and listen to the audio of this battalion chief who takes command, basically taking command of the situation and telling everybody, do not approach. I mean, he is so clear and specific about what he needs, what he wants dispatch to do, what he needs police officers and law enforcement to do, and what he wants other responding units coming into the scene. He's very clear about what he wants, and he's trying to drive this situation, this horrible situation. He's trying to drive it to the best of his ability and to keep other people safe and other firefighters safe, and all of them, all the first responders. He's very aware immediately that this has been done intentionally to draw them in, them being the firefighters. And then obviously, he sounds to me like this shooter was just randomly shooting at anybody and everybody that was in the scene once the firefighters were put down. But again, that's speculation. We weren't there. We're gonna have to fill in some of the gaps a little bit. But the audio is so good. It's so clear. That battalion chief is probably going to be doing quite a bit of lecturing or some type of public speaking if he's able to do that after this whole thing has unfolded. But you have to tap into that experience now and understand what did they fall back to? Did they fall back to specific training that they already had within their department? Was it just a few people that had some specific training? And we don't know that. But I just encourage very much in this show and then on this episode that every firefighter should get out there and have some formal level of training specific to this discussion, And the hats go off to this particular battalion chief that took charge of the scene. And I think he did an amazing job.
Well, and even prior to that, when the initial incident occurred, I mean, the response, there was excitement in the voice, but called for police, notified who was down, who needed assistance. I mean, they were very clear on communicating all across the board. So, I mean, if they had no training, they did really well. If they had training, they fell back on their training in order to get the resources that they needed right away. So it's a very unfortunate incident overall, but it appeared they handled it pretty well overall.
Well, and the fact that there was, yeah, exactly. And the fact that beyond the initial three that were shot and the loss of the two battalion chiefs, there were no other victims. Thank goodness. And I think that you have to give it, credit to that battalion chief who took charge. I think his call sign was BC5 or Chief 5. But anyways, the battalion chief that ultimately I assume that he did take command and stayed in command for the duration of the incident. For the fire side of things. Now, this situation, as we know, is predominantly, I mean, yeah, it's a fire incident, right? That's how this one started. It started as a fire incident, and it's quickly changed to a law enforcement necessity to engage and become involved with, not to mention the fact that they still had a fire to deal with. This wildfire, I know it went beyond just a few acres. It was several hundred of acres that were involved here. So you still have another emergency that's happening. That's the other, crazy part about this, is that there is an actual different, and then, I mean, I draw a different correlation there, because if you look at, say, other types of incidents that were specifically active shooter situations, you look at Columbine, you look at the Aurora theater in Colorado, things of those, things that have just happened and they were intentionally active shooter. Lots of those have happened across the country, active shooter incidents. But this one started as a fire incident in real time. And it would be no different than firefighters rolling up on a house. And this has happened. Firefighters have been called to house fires with a sniper waiting in the wings, sitting across the street in a tree or whatever, and high-powered rifle, and starting taking pot shots at firefighters. So this has happened. This is something that's already happened.
Oh yeah, the '96 Atlanta Olympics, right? They had the secondary device. They had an explosive device that went off, and secondary device was supposed to capture the first responders going to that incident. I mean, the World Trade Center in the early '90s. Right? A similar thing there, right? Initial device, secondary device.
Right.
Fortunately, those things
Boston
didn't.
Bombing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it happens. We just need to be aware that, the risks that we take, there's additional risks that we might not be aware of. And I wanted to go back to something that you were talking about, where they still had a fire incident that was active while this shooter incident was active. And I think a lot of people do fall back, because this essentially is now your Mayday, right? And your RIT team now responds, but your firefighters, your operations still need to continue to put out that fire. So I think that's one of those things where we do train, and that's where you fall back on the training of, the other firefighters responding to that, whether they had to go a different route or anything like that. Hopefully they were able to do that safely and take care of the other job that was still need to be done.
This episode of the original Firefighter Podcast is sponsored by Castle Contracting. Castle Contracting offers commercial and residential restoration, leading the industry in roofing, residential siding, gutters and downspouts, egress window installation, storm damage assessment and repair, and solar energy, saving you money and time. If you want to be treated like royalty, contact Castle Contracting to schedule a free inspection. Call them at 877-512-4207 or go online and visit castleexteriors.net. That's 877-512-4207 or go online and visit castleexteriors.net. Serving Illinois, Wisconsin, and Kentucky, Castle Contracting has you covered. Your home is your castle. Call Castle Contracting today.
Well, that's a great, point there, Phil, is that we do have writ now for firefighters, at structure fires, and that took a long time for the fire service to implement.
Right.
We had plenty of downed firefighters and loss of life due to just fighting fires in the fire service. We've had lots of history of killing firefighters. And then we started getting a little bit smarter and said, okay, so when the firefighter's in trouble, what do we do with that? And then we started getting into 2 in and 2 out, and we started getting into, rapid intervention teams, or if you're out where I'm at now, I think they call them RIC, rapid intervention crew. Regardless, you call it what you want. I really don't care. It's just that you have a group of firefighters that are ready and dedicated and trained. That's the important part, is that they're trained to respond in a certain fashion that has really nothing to do with putting the fire out any longer. That may still have to be a component that they deal with as the RIT goes in to get a firefighter down. There may be immediate fire that they have to control to protect the down firefighter and themselves. Now we need to switch gears and start thinking, okay, we got it handled for the fire service. What are we going to do when this happens again? What we're seeing play out in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho? How is this going to change or affect the fire service? I don't think that we can just stand back and say, well, this is just a one-off situation. We've already had the conversation so far in this episode. Yes, they were law enforcement as well, but we've had an ambush in Milwaukee, we had an ambush in Chicago, and all these possibilities have been playing out on national coverage news. So it just takes an idiot, with bad intentions to come up with the next scheme.
Yeah, I mean, even go back to our active shooter that me and you were on together. That could have very easily turned into an ambush situation because we didn't know who the shooter was.
Yeah, I mean, let me paint a picture for you there on that. You bring up the Don Carter shooting, December 26, 2019. That individual, and we will not say the names or give any credit to these bad actors that do these things. You can go online and look that up yourself. But that particular individual, he was a bad egg that got out of the military and was having some sort of a mental traumatic breakdown of some sort. Again, I ain't going to try to diagnose what's in that guy's head, but he shot and killed several people inside of the bowling alley there. But he was actually specifically intentionally engaging with the first responders when he was taken into custody. He looked at the police officers and the firefighters and basically said, yeah, I wasn't ever going to shoot you guys. I like you guys. Like, he said that. He was like, my beef's not with you guys. So it's interesting, you call crazy, but in the moment, he was very specific about what he thought of first responders. Like, he was like trying to convey a message like, oh, you guys are cool, so I wasn't going to engage you guys. Okay, now flip the script. Now, I mean, okay, it's still terrible. There was still loss of life. There were still innocent people that lost their lives. But now flip the script and have a person who is angry with first responders, police officers get the brunt of it for sure. They get the brunt of it. But now all of a sudden it's almost become like any person in a uniform. The firefighters wear a uniform, the police officers wear a uniform, the medics wear a uniform, the military wears a uniform. It's my opinion that it's basically this anti-authoritarian society is saying, well, if you have a badge on or wear a uniform and I have a beef with you.
Right.
Until I need you.
Yeah.
Until I need you.
And most people,
yeah,
unfortunately, aren't smart enough to know the difference between a firefighter and a police officer. Because like you said,
absolutely.
Badge and uniform, same thing. I don't know how many times I've been called officer on scenes of incidents.
Sure.
I don't know how many times I've been asked for my badge and my name, like the one video we watched the other day.
Something up.
This ain't fucking LA.
Lieutenant Sipowicz here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
I don't have to do that.
Yeah.
You can request that from headquarters if you want it. My name's on my uniform if you need it. I'm not going to give you that information. I don't have to.
Well, it does seem like the bigger conversation really is mental health. I mean, that's kind of at the root of all these incidences that we're discussing. So I'm glad that we're doing what we can to help contribute to improving the mental health situation for first responders, but our communities in general just need to get things together, man. It's rough.
It is rough. It is rough, and it's only made harder for the crew members who are still here. Um, the ones that are gone, that are lost in the line of duty, they're dead, they're murdered. Let's be clear about this. I mean, these are murdered firefighters. These are murdered police officers. And it makes me think of we recently just had the No Kings protests a few weekends ago, and I was in Madison, Wisconsin for that particular Saturday when the protests and the marching was going on across the country. Apparently, something like 2,000 sites had protests across the country, and we know the rhetoric, and we know that half these people don't even know what they're marching against. They hold a stupid sign up and they think that they're making a difference. But I was stopped in my tracks. And we'll actually, we're not even going to put that photo up, but I did snapped a photo of spray painting that went on on the Capitol grounds, and it was specifically it was on the law enforcement, the Wisconsin law enforcement fallen police officers memorial, and someone had wrote "kill cops" in black spray paint, and it was jarring. It is just jarring that it's not that I don't know. It's not that we, us on the show here, it's not that we don't know that there is that mentality out there, that there's people with terrible intentions towards police officers, but to write it in such a public way, and to be okay with that, to actively be doing that in the moment and conveying that message in real time to people, and then expecting that all of us in the fire service and the law enforcement community and in medicine and all that, in emergency medicine, that we're just going to sit back and we're going to take that. I mean, yeah, that might be a message specifically for cops, but I take offense to it. And we should all do that. We should all be offended by that.
Well, I think this is a really good conversation. I think the whole point of this is not to, critique what happened in Idaho and how things went down. Sounds like they did an incredible job with, what they had at their disposal and in the moment, keeping a cool head and giving clear instruction. But I think it will be interesting to see, in the months ahead, what we can learn from the situation to try to, avoid, or at least be prepared for if and when that happens again in the future.
Yeah, I definitely, the message here with this episode is a heartfelt condolences going out to the firefighters in Idaho and their families and to their departments, and how they recover and how they move forward after this incident. But also to reflect on the fact that I don't think this is no longer just a one-off situation. It may not be the front and center. It's certainly not. Phil, you are a fellow firefighter and a friend of mine, and we know what our mission is as firefighters. It is different. It's a different mission than the law enforcement community, and it's supposed to be. I mean, we're okay with it. We understand the different missions. It's the fact that our mission statements between law enforcement and fire service, those lines are coming together more often. They are not running as just in parallel any longer, where they don't intersect. They intersect a lot. They intersect very, very often.
This episode is brought to you by Strike the Box Cigars, Pipes, and Tobacco. Whether you're a seasoned aficionado or just starting your journey into the world of fine tobacco, Strike the Box has what you need. From the finest cigars to premium loose leaf tobacco, Strike the Box delivers on quality in a welcoming space where you can enjoy a smoke and good company. Additionally, Strike the Box specializes in vintage pipe restoration. We're talking estate pipes brought back to life with craftsmanship that borders on art. Got Grandpa's old briar gathering dust? Let the crew at Strike the Box make it smoke like new. Check out their full list of vintage pipes for sale at striketheboxpipeandcigar.com, or swing by the shop located at 6935 11th Street, New Milford, Illinois. Soak in the aroma and talk shop with real tobacco lovers from the American Fire Service. Strike the Box, where fire, flavor, and tradition meet. Again, that's striketheboxpipeandcigar.com, or swing by the shop located at 6935 11th Street, New Milford, Illinois.
And to swing a little bit over into the situation in Texas, it's not certainly the same type of thing that we're discussing here, but we know for a fact that it's not just firefighters that are searching for those that have been lost and not recovered from the flooding. It's everybody, in the emergency response community. It's police officers and medics and civil servants and the National Guard, and they're all out there trying to save these people from these floodwaters. And there's been already a significant loss of life. I know it's approaching 30 people, and still some missing, including children that have been lost. And so the devastation this last week in the entire emergency service has been a heavy one, very, very heavy. This is about communities that are getting torn apart by man-made disasters and natural disasters. It's all happening, constantly. And there's never been a time in the fire service for us there's never been another time like this where we have to really, really appreciate and understand that we are on the front lines just as much as anybody else has ever been in the past. We just now have another threat of the active shooter, the active threat that is starting to get closer and closer to our front lines.
Yeah, I mean, speaking on the Texas floods, the reports keep coming in, right? Right now, current are up to at least 70 dead. And then there's still...
Wow, I didn't realize that it jumped that high.
Yeah, and they're still looking for 11 of the children from the camp that was there. So far, it's 38 adults and 21 children that are confirmed dead from that. So that's only 59, but the 70 total, they just don't know who those people are, confirmed of who those people are yet. But yeah, to think that the floodwaters rose, 8 feet within a short period of time is, again, something. How do you prepare? 7 to 29 feet in just a few hours.
Yeah,
that's.
Yeah, there was one area that the floodwaters rose like 26 feet in like 45 minutes.
Yeah.
It was just, crazy, and don't take those numbers to be, dead on accurate, but it was very quickly, many feet in a matter of minutes. And so obviously we have this significant loss of life because so many people, again, caught off guard and not expecting that, right? Hats off. We should at least acknowledge, because we've done our best to call out the mayor and the governor of California when they've dropped the ball. Sounds like to me that the guys in Texas, the governor there, and he got engaged right away, and they're doing their best to manage the situation in real time.
Yeah, I mean, as well as you can for yet again another incident like this, right? I mean, it's a little bit different than Katrina when that hit and New Orleans flooded. They were warned. The mayor of New Orleans did not want to request the federal assistance, right? It starts local, it ends local, but at some point you have to request for the state and for the federal government for that assistance. And until you do that, they're not coming in. And unfortunately, they waited too long, requested them. Well, that was after the incident occurred. So it's one of those things to where, if with the forewarning, kind of similar to the fires in LA, right? They waited. And then how do you get the federal government in there, the resources in there after the incident occurred and it wiped out roads, so you can't travel, now airfare and things like that. I remember I was out in Colorado and they had one of the worst, at the time, I think it was the worst wildfire. There were no rental cars anywhere. Like, they canceled my reservation for my rental car because my flight was delayed, and the federal government came and took it. There's only so many resources on the ground that they're able to utilize in those situations. So if you delay those things, it makes things a lot worse. So I call it the piss poor preparation equals piss poor performance.
Yeah.
See that one?
Yeah, no, that's for sure.
Yeah.
That's for sure. And there you go. There's your call to action right there to the fire service across the country, firefighters out there. Make sure that you are engaged in all types of training, to include protecting yourself and your crew to the possibility of active shooter, active threat. And then obviously on the show, we often tend to swing over to anything that's going on across the country. And there's been a lot of stuff in 2025. Wow. I mean, it's just been a banger of a year. And this might be the new normal, where we're just seeing more and more of these things happening. We know that, weather events are happening more and more often. But to that point, we also know that man-made disasters are happening more and more as well. That includes the active shooter. And, Aaron, you brought up before, and I take a clear stance that it is a mental health problem. Those that are engaging, I'm just not going to I'm not trying to turn a blind eye that, weapons and guns, and that there shouldn't be some kind of regulation to a degree of I'm not gonna call it gun control, because I personally don't believe in that. I believe in the Second Amendment. But I think that as a society, that we have a problem with mental health and illness, and lack of funding to that, lack of access to that, and that too often then that does result in someone turning to a weapon and using that weapon against innocent people. And so at least just acknowledging that exists out there. We know it's out there, and that the firefighters are not immune to getting involved in these situations by any means. And Coeur d'Alene, Idaho just underscores that. So I think with that, in this particular episode, we're just going to stand firm on make sure that you receive proper training. I highly recommend anything in the line of rescue task force, or anything that gets the first responder engaged with dealing with how to act and react in a active shooter, active threat incident. And then going beyond that, our training is invaluable. So if you spend any amount of your time with your crew members at the firehouse when you're during your shifts, pick a topic, pick a subject, and go train on it, because you're going to be faced with it at some point. And to fill your point, piss poor preparation is going to determine, and the outcome will be a piss poor performance. Not to steal your saying that, but that's a good one.
I stole it from somebody else, so it's cool. It's yours now. I gift this to you. Here you
it's
go.
Ours. It's ours. Yeah.
I forgot to wrap it.
So with that, make sure that you tune in to the Original Firefighter Podcast each week. It will be here on YouTube, and we can be found on all the other platforms, Apple Podcasts, Amazon, Spotify. Please subscribe and follow us. The new format is here. We will be broadcasting between Rockford, Illinois and Whitefish, Montana. And from time to time, we'll be back in the studio together. It won't be as often as it was before, but this will be their new format, and we look forward to other guests on the show, and we look forward to seeing you guys each week here. So as always, be safe.
This has been the Original Firefighter Podcast. Thanks for watching and listening. Tune in each week on Wednesdays for a new episode. Like and follow us on all social media platforms, and subscribe to our YouTube channel today.